Welcome back to another episode of the Wisdom Wednesday series. If you're new here, my goal for this series is really two things, right? One is to share with you guys some of the lessons that I've learned along my life, and also two, in hopes that by me sharing, I can internalize this better for myself. So, with that being said, let's get right into this one. So, you know, just like how a caterpillar has to go into a cocoon for months to start their transformation, you need to get off the grid for some time and lock in order to get to where you want to go. See, the problem, right? They say, Les Brown says, the graveyard is the richest place on earth because it is here that you find all hopes and dreams that were never fulfilled because someone was too afraid to take that first step. Now, from what I've seen, especially amongst the younger people, is that a lot of fear comes from the thought of being outcasted or being alone, or leaving behind what's comfortable in the life they know, right? And today I'm going to be deep diving into like loneliness and how your fear or reluctance or hesitancy or whatever you want to label it or call it, whatever, of being alone is holding you back. Now, quick disclaimer, right? I'm fully aware that we are social creatures and some people are naturally more extroverted or introverted than others. But here's why your fear of being alone is a problem, right? Sometimes you got to lock in, you got to be by yourself. And if you're not wanting to do that, here's why it could be a problem, right? One, right? Um, you may be either very boring or have a very traumatic past, right? If you're afraid to be alone, be in your own thoughts, be by yourself, you're either A, very boring, or B, you've been through some stuff and you don't want to be in your own thoughts. Or there might be other reasons, but those are, I feel like, the main two that I've at least come across, right? And so, which is again, that then may lead to another big can of worms for you to solve that we won't get into for today. But we get into the second reason why your fear of being alone is a problem. You can become too dependent on others. If you never spend any time by yourself, you're always going to be relying on other people's opinions, what other people are doing, and how you'll be at the mercy of other people for the rest of your life if you're not afraid to be alone, right? Uh, Three is you never get a chance to be still, right? Sometimes I know people get their best ideas in different, different scenarios. Some people get their best ideas when they're out for a drive. Some people get when they're out for a run. Some people in the shower, right? Um, some people when they're meditating. But if you're never alone, you never get a chance to be still. And when you're still is usually when you get some of the very, very best ideas that you could ever come up with. So being still is super important. And if you're always in the crowd, you're always in the mix, you're always with people, you'll never ever be able to be alone, right? Um, Four is it's easier to get derailed and distracted, right? So again, if you're always in the mix, if you're always with people, they maybe have their own goals. They maybe have their own things that they want to do in their life. They maybe have their own problem that they're worrying about. And if you're always with people, it can be very easy to get distracted and not focus on the problem that you have in your own life, right? And focus on the work that you got to do in your own life. Now, this could also be very bad if you have bad company that you're around, right? Because now you have the opportunity to get into very bad trouble, and that could, especially when you're young. If you're young and you get arrested, you can always turn your life around. But let's say you get locked up and you're doing 5, 10 years, right? That's 5, 10 years of solid years, right? Right. Let's say you get locked up in your 20s. You're never gonna have more energy, more, at least potential of energy. Because some people are not getting better shape later down the road, but like your potential to work, right, is so much higher when you're younger versus when you're older. Now, let's say you take care of yourself, then there's people again that are older, that are in way better shape than they were when they were younger. But if you're in shape when you're young and you're in shape when you're old, right, you're always gonna be able to do more when you're younger, right? It might not be as wise, but you'll always be able to do more. And so if you're around the wrong people, if you're not, don't ever spend time alone, you're gonna have a higher likelihood to just keep going into situations that are not actually pushing you forward, right? Whether really bad, like maybe a crime, or just like even if you're just going out for drinks with your friends, right? If you're always going out for drinks, that's not in itself a horrible thing. But if you do that too much, again, it could easily derail you from what your goals actually are. And then five, if you're afraid of being alone, you'll never reach your full potential, right? You have there's a saying, right? A coffin only has one room, one, I guess, one bed for a reason. Like, they don't make coffins in bunk beds. They don't make coffins in, in tools, right? It's Coffins are meant for one person. Why? Because you come in alone, right? You go out alone, and so when a lot of people, they spend their whole life with people, and never by themselves. And again, there's some things that you can only do alone. There's some missions in life. If you think about it like campaign, there's some missions in life where it's only solo missions, right? And so if you never ever do those solo missions, you're just never gonna get to where you could have potentially gotten to, than if you had done them, right? So let me, before I say the solution, um, let me share the difference between what I think. I actually, let me take you into my backstory. So for me, the reason I learned this lesson is that during the pandemic, it happened very abruptly, right? I was in college, it's freshman year, March 2020. We're about to go away for spring break. Next thing you know, we never ever come back from spring break. Now, when I went to college, I kind of lost touch with everybody. I kind of lost touch with everybody from back in high school. So I already kind of got separated, but I made some new friends, had a great group of people up in college, had a blast with them. We had a little group called FNS. That was our little group name. And once the pandemic happened, well, then I already had lost touch with people from high school. So that made me lose touch even more. Right. And then I stopped playing Xbox when went to college. So I lost touch with some of my boys that I was super cool with growing up. And then the pandemic happened, and no one was really talking to each other. And I feel like as guys, we don't ever catch up with, with each other, I feel. And then I started working a new job, and then, like, I don't know, I don't really remember much from 2020. I just remember working, right? Working, and I think playing basketball were like the only two things I kind of remember that year after the pandemic happened. And so then fast forward late 2020, that's when I read my first book. And then I started watching videos on YouTube and entrepreneurship. And then in 2021 is when I dropped out and decided to pursue my real estate classes. And for like 6 months, I was pushing like almost 60, 70 hours a week on top of studying for my real estate exam. And so I don't really remember much of anything. I don't really remember talking to anyone outside of just my jobs. And that was pretty much it the entire time. And by the time I really got back to catching up with my boys, and then years had passed. But because for that one time period, that 2021, when I was so dialed that year, because I was dialed in. I was alone. I didn't really have many people to talk to again outside of my jobs. I lost touch with all the people I used to be like super close with, bro. That helped get me so much further, so much faster. Like, that tunnel vision allowed me to overcome that first big hump of just taking that leap into entrepreneurship, right? So many people never even try to start a business, right? Because most businesses fail. But again, I dropped out during college, during a pandemic, right? Despite, again, I had great grades in college. So I had a 3.83 out of 4, point 0 GPA. So I was pretty much 0.17 away from a perfect GPA. I was doing really good, and I was heavily involved. Left that during a pandemic to get into real estate, right? And I'm like a third of the average age of realtors here in Connecticut. It's a lot of old money, especially in like Lower Fairfield County, right? Whole new world. I don't have family in real estate. I don't have family in real estate adjacent industries, right? Like landscaping or like attorney, mortgage, or whatever. Like, I didn't have any of that stuff. I just kind of I had an idea, right? And kind of went all in. And because of that, that allowed me again to get so much further, so much faster, because I had a time period, a little time skip arc where I was kind of to myself. I didn't reach out to anybody, and that helped me get now. Now here's where the solution comes into play. There's a difference between solitude and being alone, I think, and at least how I want to describe the difference. And someone, if I'm wrong, fact check me. I feel like being alone, that's when you're like kind of like outcasted. You're, you are, you don't really fit in. People don't really want you around. Like your presence isn't wanted. I feel like that's when you're alone, right? Whereas like solitude, it's more like it's your own decision. Like you're deciding to be by yourself versus I think alone. And again, I could be wrong, but this is just how in my brain I kind of understand it. Alone is like when you're outcasted, no one wants to, really wants to spend time with you. Your presence isn't wanted or needed. Whereas solitude is you're choosing intentionally to take time to yourself, right? To be with yourself and not have any distractions. And so I don't think of it as that time period of me being alone. I think of that time period of me being in solitude, right? Me being in solitude. And so that's the solution. You don't have to be alone. I'm not saying cut off the whole world and not talk to anybody, but I think there's points in time where you have to be in solitude. Once you can just be at peace with yourself, so you can focus, so there's no external voices or distractions, right? But two, so like you can really just get tunnel vision and lock in, right? Again, most of the time, our friends that we grew up with, our family, they all have their own journeys, they all have their own goals that they're striving towards, and so most of the time, it's not the same exact ones that we're doing. And even if someone wanted to get into real estate at the same time as me, maybe they want to do commercial, or maybe they want to do rentals only, or maybe they, are just getting their license to do investments, right? There could be so many things. So it's like sometimes you just need to go all in solitude and do the work required until it's time to get to that next stage, right? And again, after that 2021, after that, again, 6, 7, 8 month period where I just was like super dialed in, well, then I started to go out to networking events and started to meet new people and started to put myself out there again. But like that 6 month period, I wasn't going out. There was nothing really in my personal life. I played basketball a little bit, but aside from that, I was really just locked in. Now, here's why this works so much better. One, by spending time in solitude, you get to enjoy your presence more. You become your own best friend, right? You realize that you don't need anyone else. Your value doesn't come from other people. Like you're good on your own, and that's okay. Again, and I'm not saying that you don't need friends. I'm just saying you're good on your own. And when you then add friends, it's that much better, right? Two, when you're in solitude again, you can really just get that tunnel vision and really lock in and grind and do just work, 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 right? And again, it's not for forever, but for small sprints, right? We call them sprint seasons. Small sprint season, you can get a lot done when you lock in, get off the grid, and aren't worried about what the world got going on, right? Three, it takes you away from social media. It could be very easy once you're in social media to just like, like especially when you're in entrepreneurship and business, because now you're like, oh, I gotta be on social media, I gotta promote my business, but sometimes you just get off the grid, and that kind of helps reset you, reset your dopamine receptors, reset like because you get stuck on that scroll pattern, and then you always want to scroll. Your brain's constantly looking for them dopamine hits, and so like you kind of get off the grid, you get out the way, and that kind of helps reset it, right? Four, why solitude is super important. Um, is because also when you get the most clarity. I feel like whenever I'm alone, that's when God starts helping me. The path becomes clearer, right? That's when God usually starts illuminating things for me. I feel when I've been in solitude, not when I'm all in everyone's faces and in the mix and in the crowd, right? Um, taking a and there's an old quote too. Now that I think about it, the road less traveled. There's a poem on it. I forget who it's by, but it talks about how they took the road less traveled and made all the difference. Especially if you're trying to get into this entrepreneurship road, most people will never start a business. Most people who start a business fail. And so by just having a successful business, that's going to help you. That's going to put you in a circle where not too many people have ever been, nor ever plan to be. So there's that. And so overall, again, there's a difference between being alone and being in solitude. And once you understand that, you come to terms with that, it's not forever that you're going to be in these little sprint seasons where you're not talking to nobody, you're not going out, you have no social life. But every now and then, when you need to get something done, get off the grid and just double down, lock in, do what you got to do. And then once you're done, come up for air, hang out with some friends again, start reintegrating people, your social life, get that restarted up. And then that's it. So that's all for this episode. And I'll see you guys in the next one.